be sharing Jenny, Jess, and I. And basically what this chapel is about is death and loss. And today we have on our stage a grief group that we formed last year. Around January, February of last year, we came together with the help of Mr. Gawachian and Mrs. Rock to form a grief group where we could share about our losses, about grief, and kind of what we were going through. And we did this because in a matter of less than a year, all of us had lost someone relatively close to us. I lost my sister, Jess lost her mom, and Jenny lost her brother. So the point of our group was to share and talk and just be open with each other, talk about like how we were doing, how life was, what we were feeling, what was going on. And our meeting started after school on Wednesdays last year. And we started off our grief group by first kind of doing what we're going to do today for you guys, which is we're going to introduce to you who we lost and tell you about how we lost them, and then just kind of tell you about what we've learned through going through this pain and death and stuff like that. So after meeting for after meeting for quite a long time, we started to get more warmed up to each other, and now pretty much we're like sisters to each other. We talk about everything and anything, and we can be honest with each other. And so today we want to be honest with you and talk about just our stories. So I think most of you know a little bit about my story, since my family was pretty public about what happened with my sister. But for those of you coming in freshmen and those of you who don't know, I lost my sister to cancer last year on November 1st. And a little bit about Emily. I want to talk about her first before I go into how I lost her. So this is Emily, and she was 3 years older than me. And basically, I just want to tell you a little bit about who she is. And well, she was my best friend. I could tell her everything, and I did. And we went on walks. That was our big thing. We always went walking together. And we talked about faith, about guys, about what we wanted for our future, and who we wanted to be. She's absolutely gorgeous inside and out, as you can see. And she's a little shy with others, but she wasn't with me, so I got to see who she was really, and I always treasured that. She's hilarious, and the two of us together, we would be crying, laughing, because we just kept building on each other's humor, and we were so silly and giggling together all the time. And another thing that she was known for is for being an artist. You can go to this slide. So I'm going to show you some of her pieces. This is one that she did for Arts Day, actually. Next. And next. I think there's one more. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about her diagnosis. You can go to the next slide, too. All right, so a little bit more about Emily, though. She's a huge Marilyn Monroe fan, and I don't know if you can see this, but she's holding the Lizzie McGuire DVD. So if any of you guys know who Hilary Duff is, most of you should know who she is. The big running joke was that Emily looked exactly like Hilary Duff. Like when she went to college, everyone commented on it. So that's one of the first pictures I remember seeing on her Facebook wall in college. Her roommates got together and had her pose like Lizzie McGuire. Okay, and the next slide. So I think the big thing to start is that before Emily was diagnosed, my Nana was actually diagnosed with cancer. And then a few months later, we figured out that Emily also had cancer. So this is them two together. And you can just go through the slides. So last May, Emily came back from college with a pain in her upper back, and a CAT scan revealed she had an aggressive form of cancer, and eventually she was diagnosed with dedifferentiated sarcoma. So there was no concrete treatment plan because her cancer was rare, but we decided to do 6 weeks of chemo for the summer, and after that we would do 2 major surgeries to remove the tumor in August. After the surgeries, I had to go back to school, but what ended up happening after the surgeries is that there were some complications and Emily had to stay in the hospital for 3 months. After the 3 months in the hospital, with my parents away and me running back and forth from my grandparents' house to the hospital, which was in Johns Hopkins, Maryland, which is about a 4-hour drive, I got a call the week of Sandy, which is also the week of Halloween, and it was my parents telling me that Emily was dying. So, obviously, it was the worst thought I could possibly get. It came as a shock. We've been fighting for her life. It wasn't something that, you can stop it, I think this is my last picture. We had been fighting for her life and we didn't expect her to die at that point. We were hoping to take her home that week, actually. So, I was able to get up there in time, and then, these are some hospital pictures. There's one more, I think. And this is actually a day before I think she died. And so, I think that's just a little bit about my story. She ended up dying on November 1st, which is All Saints Day, which couldn't have been a better day for her to go. I think one of the things I just wanted to talk about is a lot of people in here have experienced some type of grief, and by that I mean I think a lot of people in here have been depressed. And grief is actually, it's basically a form of depression. So if you've ever been depressed, you have a glimpse of what grief is when you lose someone. I think the added-on thing of grief is that you start not only mourning the person, but you start mourning the memories that you have with them or could have had with them. I know that one of the big things that I've been mourning with Emily is just mourning me as I go off to college, not having her with me, my college choice I had to make without her, and just little things like all of us girls are talking about, what we're going to miss, wedding days and days that we graduate. All those days are going to be just marked by a little bit of sadness and bitterness. So now that you kind of have an idea of my story and a little bit of grief, I wanted to talk about kind of what I've learned and my advice for you guys. And let me just get my notes on my page. So I think the thing is that last year I actually got touched by death in more than Emily's way. I actually ended up losing my cousin that summer too, who was about Emily's age. She was like 21. And so I, who had never experienced any type of death really earlier before that, was hit with it all in a matter of less than a year. So I think one of the big things that I started to realize as I went through this grief is one of the things you go through is kind of going through a new identity, because you've lost someone who's close to you, and so you're trying to figure out who I am, like who am I without them. So I'm trying to kind of figure out like who is the person that right now that I'm going through grief. So it makes me kind of a different person than I was, because I'm probably a little bit more emotional than I usually am. And so I'm trying to figure out, is that like what part of me is the grief and what part of me is who I am, like who I am now, who's new and who's grief. So trying to figure those two out, and also just trying to figure out who I am apart from Emily, because like the first 16 and a half or even probably about 17 years of my life, Emily was a part of me, and you're inseparable, and she was part of my identity. So I think one of the things you go through with grief is identity crisis. And I think another thing that I just want to share with you guys is that what death has done is it's given me a new perspective, and I really want you guys to hear this, because this is just something that I'm hoping will be valuable for you guys. And I think the big thing that I learned is that relationships are all that matter in life. Like, when everything's stripped away, when health is stripped away, and the only thing that I ended up doing last year was like going back and forth to the hospital, and everything that mattered before, like schoolwork and just things and objects and petty fights and anything like that just seems so little comparison to my family and my sister. And I think what the big thing is that I want you guys all to realize that at the end of the day, like when you die, the only thing that's going to matter is the relationships that you had in your life and the effect that you had on other people around you. And just one of the things I wanted to point out too is I've never been a huge petty person, so I've never understood this, but I just want to say, like, it really hurts me when I see people around me just being petty with each other and like, oh, this person said this about me, and now I hate them, and we're not friends anymore, and that's just really hard for me because I saw that a lot when I was at school last year, and I was just like looking at people and I couldn't believe it because I was like, my sister's in the hospital right now fighting for her life, and you're telling me about this problem that you're having, like, that's obviously not very significant. Although, you know, as a friend, I want to hear all my friends' problems, even the ones that don't seem significant. But at that time, I just started to realize, like, wow, this really doesn't matter in the scheme of things. And I think the other big thing that I learned is that obviously life is short. My sister only got to live 19 years. She was almost 20. And I think the big thing is that all those dreams that you have, all those desires and goals that you have for yourself, like, you need to pursue them. You need to actively pursue the relationships that you want to have in your life because you don't know how long you're going to live and you don't know how much time you have. So I hope that this kind of gives you, I hope that this was helpful and valuable and that you kind of have an idea of what grief is and what my story is. Thank you.